So the way we format our events generally, when it is a panel discussion, we invite all our panelists to give short presentations, voluntarily and also optional. But we, all the panelists that we have today, I think most of you already know who they are, and we do not need much introduction. But I would like to introduce Professor Hassan Radoine. You may have read his profile on our website. I sent you this morning. Professor Hassan Radoine can be, and in fact, termed as one of the authority figure to talk about Middle Eastern architecture. So he's an architecture curator, critic, educator, author, and consultant. He's currently the director of the School of Architecture, Urbanism, and Design at University Mohammed VI Polytechnic in Morocco. Is that how you say it? Yeah. Mohammed VI. Okay. And was previously the director of the École Nationale d'Architecture. He's also chaired the Architecture Engineering Department at University of Sharjah, and he received his diploma from ENA. As a Fulbright scholar, he completed his MSc and PhD in architecture at the University of Pennsylvania.
Yes.
So we have a UPenn majority here. And an MPhil in architecture from the Prince of Wales Institute of Architecture and University of Wales. He taught at many universities, that includes UPenn, Dartmouth College, University of Sharjah, and a few others. And he has worked with many different international organizations that include our subject of this month, Aga Khan Trust, and UNESCO, UN Habitat, and many others. He recently has published a few books, and one of them is important for the discussion of this week, and also soon we are going to hear his public lecture on 3rd October. Is on architecture in context, designing in the Middle East. Without much ado, let's invite Professor Hassan Radoine to give a short presentation before the discussion begins.
Thank you for this introduction. I hope to be the expectation for this title. So it's proved. Okay, good. Hello everyone, Assalamu alaikum. So, first of all, I'd like to thank Kazi, I think, for inviting me, and for Bengal Institute Architecture, Landscapes and Settlements. And happy I am to know that in Bangladesh, and particularly in Dhaka, that there is such an initiative that actually has started. Because I'm doing the same in Morocco, moving from the classical models of teaching architecture in a classical way. We need actually kind of institutes and centers to think out of the box. Doesn't mean the classical ones are not good, but they have a purpose to train architects. And schools of architecture, since the beginning, even in Europe, they were geared more towards the crafts and making architects rather than thinking research and innovation. But because of our discipline is getting very complicated, cities are getting very complex, and we cannot just be a bunch of artists dreaming. Therefore, evidence-based design, research-based planning is the future. And of course, doesn't mean architects and planners, they don't have research, whatever project you do, it is a research endeavor, but you don't know it. So how we can be conscious? And this is why when I was leading the National School of Architecture, I had a design studio at the 5th level, which is called research-based design, or design by inquiry. That means whatever process of design you do, you need to do side research in order to reach that project. And when you look now at the industry of design in general, not only architecture, you see how these compact iPhones or any mobile phone, how many researchers are actually working around that product to make it that slim. So the design is not anymore a sketch, but more is a responsible act of including all other aspects of sustainability, environment, community, government, technology, etc. So let me move to my subject. I think the subject is quite broad, because when you say urban transformation, and you use, of course, transformation, it can mean so many layers. Urban transformation, how I define it from my own, modest expertise. I came from the background of urban regeneration and urban conservation, since I was involved in the UNESCO program of the conservation of the Medina of Fez in Morocco for 10 years. So what is urban conservation? What is urban renewal? What is urban regeneration? And what is urban metabolism? And what is urban transformation? I would claim that urban transformation is including all the previous actions. But one thing for sure, this word transformation, and I like the ones who've chosen it for this session, because transformation is most needed now for our cities. Our cities, they are becoming crowded. Our cities, they are becoming environmentally not friendly. Our cities, they are becoming not providing opportunities for jobs and other stuff. Our cities are becoming inaccessible. I don't want to be pessimist, but I think it is the right time to transform cities towards a brighter future. So what I do, I will start by the last slides and they move up, and they just tell you from where I got my ideas. I was involved as one of the experts, 15 experts, with the UN Habitat for 5 years, even before the new urban agenda that was prepared. And I think we had meetings all over continents with UN Habitat, and we forged a document called International Guidelines on Urban and Territorial Planning. I invite you sincerely to check this document. It's a really important document by disciplinary experts, and actually encompassing all elements of not urban and territorial planning from the macro level, but also at the macro of the transformative forces for cities and urban establishment. So, and the second thing, of course, based on this document, we moved with this group of experts with UN Habitat to set some case studies internationally, and there are some case studies. You can find this document from all over, from Europe, Africa, Asia, and of course targeting what are the new challenges of cities, including this transformative process that cities they need to undertake in order to reach an ideal situation. Of course, there are several other publications. The last but not least, but it's very important, I think this is what Asia and Africa can lead in the future, and how our cities, they may look like chaotic, they may look disordered, but trust me, there is a human genius with all the poverty, all the images that we can see, all the cliches that we can see. These cities, they are still humane. These cities, they still have the human scale. These cities, they are still dynamic. These cities, they are not based on checkerboard layout, but they are more actually built on a mental construct, on a memory, and this is very important. The document that you see behind me, actually Francisco Bandari, who is the previous vice director of UNESCO, he actually edited this manual. Is an international guideline to show the importance of culture in cities and urban planning. I think since Manfred and all the literature of the modernists, that the city is an abstract game, just artistic play, just an order. At the end of the day, the city should be a vehicle of culture. And this is what you have here in Dhaka. When I landed last night in the airport, I did not see the physical city, trust me, it was dark. Even there is actually lighting, but what I saw, a tremendous human movement. That's what caught me first. I could not even look up what is in the facade. I just saw these tricycles, these people, pushing, some are pushing, some driving, so it's just amazing how a city actually produces its culture. So now if we go back to this urban transformation, of course inspired from all these documents and from my own field work, I would say the following. I think now, what are the issues and challenges? Trust me, if you come to Morocco, you may have same challenges. The only difference that here the population density is very high. I think you are among the very dense urban fabrics. So therefore, maybe the challenge is more complicated than other places where the population, the number of population is less. But in terms of the performance, and this is why I prefer to use now not urban design. I dealt with urban design and sustainability in my research, but I'm moving more not to a whimsical kind of design concept to plan something, but rather to test, experiment. Because with this situation you have here, or other cities in Africa, it's not just about the act of having a pencil, but rather experiment the new ideas, experiment the performance of the city. So we cannot transform without having tools of assessment for the city. Why? Because you cannot make mistakes. There were so many mistakes accumulated in the city, and the more we do reform, we add another reform, reforms with S, thousands of reforms, at the end you get to a situation that has no end. So therefore, get this chaotic situation, and in order to transform, dissect the body of the city and try to start by both sides, by the qualities that you're looking to project and by the discrepancies and the urban deformations they need to be addressed. Normally, stakeholders, especially politicians, they are so stuck by deformations and how to resolve them. They have a critical task as well. And planners, sometimes they are projecting without even considering what the people on the ground. So therefore, how can we project a situation to transform based on a status quo, which is the reality that we're facing? And this is why I'm not here advocating international documents or a new urban agenda. To be honest with you, I've been working on different networks, and in this occasion I would like to thank Aga Khan Award that I forgot to mention at the start for sponsoring these kind of events. I think Fuad is here, he was with me, technical reviewer, and we had the chance to see the process, which is a very rigorous process. And of course, Aga Khan Trust also, they are getting into urban design and what they've done in Egypt, and of course in Darb al-Ahmar and other case studies. So now, to go to this aspect of urban transformation, there are international guidelines. There is international expertise. But international expertise is what? It's just transcendence of individual experiences, getting around the table, and then transposing a new vision based on best practices to get some specific guidelines. But the reality on the ground is very complex. So therefore, I think you are the ones who will be handling their situation more than any other extraneous or external expertise. But there are, of course, some orientations like the new urban agenda, and I think sustainable development goals, especially the number 11. And just for information, I'd like to thank sincerely the UN Habitat for convincing the General Assembly to add goal 11, because the members of states or co-representative, they did not want to include urbanization as a goal, because they said urbanization is included in other sectors. So for the first time, just to understand the complexity to include goal 11 that is dealing with cities urbanization as a goal for the sustainable development goal. So what is this sustainable development goal? Is actually to look for inclusive, I will add some adjectives of mine, inclusive, secure, resilient, sustainable human establishment. And therefore, please, I will make here a plea. I will not use urban and rural. This discrimination, this dichotomy of rural and urban, what made cities don't work and what made the rural being neglected by just saying rural. So therefore, I would prefer territory and territories. So any urban transformation is not about making urban bright, but is about making working and functionable territories within the territory. And this is why I will move now to the first step for this urban transformation. Sometimes, you know, we are architects and planners, and we can have a commission, do me a public plaza. But excuse me, public plaza where? Where? Even if you make it with a fountain, a garden, next day they will destroy it. I had that experience in Fez. We had a generous funding from the Kuwait fund, the socio-economic fund, and we restored all public fountains. Beautiful ones. After a week, they destroyed them all. So, what's the problem? Because we made this fund, and then we questioning people why. I said, you're fixing that fountain in the public street, and they don't have it at home. So there is always this contrast between what you have inside your home and what is luxurious on the public. So this contrast, it cannot be resolved without a very smart, urban planning and governance. What I'm saying about urban planning here is not about, and especially the students here in the room, this is the problem. I think, Kazi, from the literature about the urban planning and the Athens Charter, and sadly Europe divorced the Athens Charter long time ago. Developing countries, they are still applying the Athens Charter. You know, the technocratic kind of urban order. So therefore, I think we should distinguish between the master planning of 1 to 2000 and the architect maneuvering at the scale of 1 to 100. Who cares about 500 and 1000? No one. No one. So you have tough regulations coming from master planning, and then move into the architect giving him a plot, and there is something called zoning. Zoning. All right? And that zoning, you have no idea how much negative impact of zoning on cities. It just made the city more segregated, the city less multifunctional. Now they are, when they destroy the cities with master planning, now they are talking about mixed use. Everyone is talking about mixed use, but the city was always mixed use over history. I know they're, getting back. Like the term sustainability is getting a buzzword. When they destroyed cities, when they really messed with the cities, now they are coming for us with the recipe of sustainability. And everyone is using sustainability like a buzzword. We are sustainable. I think there is nothing more sustainable than Dhaka. There is no more resilient than a citizen of Dhaka. I cannot imagine someone living in Dhaka who is not resilient. Every single moment should be resilient. So, and then bring in the new term of smart. That means we were stupid before, and 2017, everyone is becoming smart. That's the problem, honestly. So what this urban transformation is about? I think I would transcend it and say urban transformation is about a process to be undertaken in order to make the human lives better. And I use a term in French with my students, habitabilité. I don't know how the translation, habitability, I don't know, because in English it's a different story. But actually is the urban human quality. The human factor is at the center. It's not a whimsical drawing sketch of a plaza, which is a circle and then a curve, and then we're done. This is not the solution. Dear colleagues, architects, planners, wake up. I'm saying this as a voice now. I'm like Kazi. launching a new school of architecture planning and design in one of the bright new universities. And by the way, with the president, I had one wish. You know what? And of course, the president is very wise because he's actually into academia and entrepreneurship. He said, please, what kind of profiles of architects that they are needed for Africa, because we're working on the African continents. I said, sir, 5 adjectives. It needs to be a builder. It needs to be an innovator. It needs to be a problem solver. And it needs to be human-centered, and then designer. Okay? And then designer. And just for information, the ones who wanted to do urban transformations in the 18th and 20th century, they were not architects. Ibn Ezra, he was an inventor. He disliked London. And then he went to his machinery kind of invention things, and he made the city like a machine and said, you know what, I fixed it. Like an engine, all right? Cerda. The word urbanism came from urbanismo, Spanish, in 1845. So was a civil engineer. So therefore, this multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary part of the urban planning process with the right governance, and when we say urban governance, doesn't mean just the mayor or the governor. No, all stakeholders. It's very important to look at the scale. If we talk about urban transformation, it's not transformation of one building. And it's not the master plan will dictate a top-down thing. It's actually the scale of urban neighborhood. Is the urban district. Is when you take a territory and you make it functional. When you start making these territories within the huge territory of the city functionable, then you can reach an ensemble that may work. Resource. The future now. The cities, they are the most consuming machines of resources. And they are destroying resources. I remember Casablanca in Morocco, metropolitization, consuming the most fertile lands. Because we are not smart in 2018. Our ancestors, they were getting to the mountains to build. We were getting to the flat lands. And the guys told me, here you have a lot of water, so it's a water land. So how can you build in a water land? Okay? So this is how to deal with this in the future. So therefore, resource and cities, and I will use this lecture to include some of the trends. Now they are talking about urban agriculture. Excuse me. In Germany, you can make urban agriculture. I mean, look, in Morocco, if I put anything in that garden without having a fence, without having, it will be gone. And neighbors, they will decide together, make here some flowers, and here some cucumber, and here some stuff. Excuse me? This is why context is very important. And trust me, in the past, our cultures, they were like that. But because of the machinization, industrialization, and copying others' urban formula, this is why we got to this mess. I don't want to be long. Social cohesion and community sense. I think it's mentioned the sustainable goals, inclusive. And please, inclusiveness, nothing to do with the racial things. No, I think inclusiveness is to do the less barriers you have in a territory, in a city, the more the city is a working system. The more metal fences around the city, the more something wrong with the city. It's not just only a social problem for information. It's more complicated than that. It's a whole system. It includes education, it includes which culture you cultivate, it includes generations of transformation, how to make the city livable, equitable, inclusive. And the sense of community that we've lost it. Everyone is getting to the apartment, closing. Do you remember before, just 10 days ago? I mean, everyone knows everyone. Now you are in the same high-rise building, you don't say salam, you don't say even hello. Okay, I just smell nice biryani then. But never invite. I mean, before, could you, yeah, I will share with you. In Morocco, we have that. Couscous, you know, we have a lot of sharing between families. Now, everything should go to the supermarket, and then the notion of the mall. So just now, I'm talking about negative transformation versus positive transformation, and how can this transformative process can be more inclusive, comprehensive, integrative, and to reach more resilient, sustainable, smart. But for me, smart is about gadgets. Like the transport nightmare you have here, how smart can help us to make this traffic engineer more smart. So transport and accessibility, I think, like for Dhaka, I can claim 50% of the problem of Dhaka will be solved if the transport problem will be solved. 50% automatically. Imagine you make, I will recommend for Kazi and all colleagues here, make some national, I don't know, day, no cars in Dhaka. And just enjoy Dhaka without a single car for one day. So that's what makes actually people in decision making more conscious about the problem of, how much these engines, of course, and each one in his car, while actually taking, even for real estate value, is no value. Innovation and technology, though I am, despite the fact I'm criticizing the word smart, but we should use it in the proper way, because I am really tired of people coming from the ICTs. They were in communication technology, and they're coming to talk with me about smart city. I said, you're making me really upset. Came with a gadget with Wi-Fi, and he said, okay, let's communicate and make it fast. Fast for what? It can be fast for destroying something. Okay? So this is why I think innovation and technology, and they would say 3 things that I put in my chapter in the UNESCO guideline. They asked me to work on this question of smart environment and the urban fabric. I said, this smart can help us for 3 qualities to transform the city. 1, compactness. Compactness. How to make the infrastructure more compact. New technology in materials, new technology in sensory, new technology in transportation, new hybrid systems. I think we need now technology to make cities more compact, because if you look at the mega infrastructure used by the cities, what takes the whole space of the city. Number 2, integration. Integration. So many services around to optimize just the traffic. If you put a couple of sensors, I know here it may not work well, because there are human sensors, like in Morocco. There is a camera, but they don't trust the camera, they trust someone to say, move there. Okay, and we have that. So, integration. And number 3, communication. I think the city is just like any other system. When the communication system is not working, the whole city sometimes has a problem to work. And number 4, in terms of this smartness, which is actually very important, resource optimization. If I look the number of ACs you have here, because you have hash climate, but these separate boxes, you have no idea how much they consume. Why? Because there is no policy in one building to make only one box, and all they will share the fees. And it will be 50% less. Absolutely. There are, of course, solar energy, renewable energy, and this is why in Morocco, I think you heard that now is the number 1 or number 2. We have the, it's no joke, Station Noor 1, Station Noor 2. Within 2030, Morocco, 45% of its energy nationwide will be renewable. No joke, because we don't have oil. Thanks God we don't have oil. Just, I am sure about it. Thank God we don't have oil. This is why we are more resilient. All right? So I will just end here. I will mention one thing. Please, this is what the Bengal Institute is trying to do, and other, of course, I know Fuad is another institution. I think it's very important now to connect, to do a lot of applied research. I think architecture now is moving to research and innovation. So please, research doesn't mean I need to, because there are architects and engineers in the room. Research doesn't mean fundamental research. You're not a physician, you're not a mathematician. So there is fundamental research, applied research, advanced engineering, and applied engineering, and of course technology transfer. All right? So we're not talking about fundamental research of solving core equations. We're talking about problem solving in applied research to move to advanced engineering to give solutions. And this is why we have grassroots engineering solutions that just smart gadgets imported from somewhere else. I have another, presentation on urban regeneration. I will not do that. I think I try to be more inclusive, including all points. I'm so sorry for the other panelists. This is a framework, but with your questions, I think we'll be all of us enriching this debate. Thank you so much for your attention.
I think that's it. We don't need any discussion. Call it an evening.
Thanks so much, Professor Radwan. Sorry, I keep mixed up. I'd now like to invite Professor Qazi Khalid Ashraf to give a short presentation.
Yeah, so I'll be very, very brief, because we want to get into the discussion and imagine we'll have a very interesting discussion following Hassan's passionate call for action. So, but I really mean it, that Hassan has really nailed it, in a very precise, beautiful and lyrical way, what we need to do about thinking about the city, which is perhaps what Bengal Institute is fundamentally involved in. And I will actually take cues from what Hassan has mentioned, and I will get to something, I'll get to an image that I collected today. I would like to point out to what Hassan said, that the city is about change. Another way to call it is transformation. And transformation can seem like a directed action. Change can seem spontaneous, so we don't need to debate about that, perhaps we can. But what he said is about transformation is of many layers, absolutely, and we need to understand those layers, and the sort of whole variety of changes and transformations that happen to cities, whether planned or spontaneous or hybrid. Urban conservation, preservation, regeneration, metabolic change, sustainability, and the mental construct, which we hardly talk about, and which I'm deeply interested in. The other way to think about cities is that there are many ways to kind of frame cities. Typically, cities have been framed lately, not by architects, definitely. Architects have nothing to do with cities, really. They build buildings and they think that they are building cities, they're not. Urban planners, geographers, statisticians, politicians, but I think the cities are framed by economists. I think they call the shots. So there is the technocratic city, there's the functional city, there's the demographic city, there's the ritualistic city, which is lived, which is the mental thing. But there's also the existential city. And the existential cities mean that people who are in the city, they make the city, as we may mention our old professor, Joseph Rickward, and he was quoting a Roman literature that we are the city. It's not the city is over there, we are the city. Without us, what is that? So I think I'm very keen in the existential city and what that may mean, and perhaps we may have a little discussion around that. And I would like to highlight that with one image and shortly. And to highlight that, I really found something in what Hassan said, and you can pull it up now. The city as a human gene, which is not very different than what I'm saying, the city as an existential space. So I was wondering what I should say today, because we can talk about the city in theoretical terms, we can talk about the city as economic dynamics, and we can talk about the city as the sustainability goals that the United Nations have set up. And that, first of all, let us agree that we can discuss the city in multiple ways, and all ways have to be brought onto the table whenever we can discuss the city. But the city is also the life of the city, the social life of the city, and we have discussed this before last week. It's about inhabiting not only the private spaces, but inhabiting the public realm. The public realm is constituted by multiple ways, the organized, the design, the meticulous public spaces, and which you're mentioning in the design of the public space, which gets then ruined right away because it's not aligning, coordinating with what people are thinking of in terms of inhabiting the public realm, because this is a sidewalk and you need to be moving. Things like that should not be happening on sidewalks, and we see that in Dhaka and many cities. that the sidewalk is one of the fundamental public realm, and people in the city, to live in the city, to make life, you can think of it to making a living, which is like a very fundamental way of talking about it, and I think it's more than that. It's about that existential condition, to be in the city, and they will make whatever they need to do to inhabit the city. And the first thing that people will do is actually to figure out ways to be in the public realm. And this is a sharp contrast, this young lady, and this is the first time I saw this image. And actually today I was thinking that what I should say, and we had a long lunch with Hassan, and the way coming back to the office I saw this. And I told my driver to kind of go around the block because I missed taking a photograph, and I took the photograph. So when I first saw the young lady, she was by herself. And when I went around, the young man has arrived. So I was late for the young woman. So, but you can see in the image, it's also what, I'll have to remind myself of my friend and colleague Rahul Mehrotra. In terms of Mumbai, he has a term called the kinetic city, because the city is constantly, different things are happening. In the evening, she might move out, and this is not a sight that you see constantly, a tailor shop set up on the sidewalk. Because it's a nice weather, you can do that. And she's very entrepreneurial. Yeah. And that's the thing. So, have you seen anything like this before? The streets of Dhaka, on the sidewalk of Dhaka in Bonani, on a street corner, she has set up a shop. Fantastic, right? But I don't know, she's like, managing the neighborhood. So this young woman, and also another thing, she has placed herself in a very strategic way as an urban designer would indicate, street corner. The corner is the most important, the crossing of the street. She's not in the middle of the street, in the middle of the neighborhood, at the street corner. Street corner is where things happen, where you find the cafe, the shop, and convenience store. That's where she is. So she knows urban design inherently, where I should locate myself. She can be anywhere. So, right? And so this young woman setting up this entrepreneurial station, and she seems to be, I think something is going on here. Look at her smile. So there's an encounter. And so there's this young woman and the man, and then this encounter, which is what the city is about. So also what I mean by the existential city, and we discussed this last week, life in the public realm, life in the social space of the city. It's about encounters. It's about conversations, accidental, planned. And we need to be thinking about those things also. So as in whatever capacity we work with the city, whatever way we think about transformation of the city, the transformation doesn't mean the changing the skyline, which architects are quite capable of. But I think transformation at that level, literally at the ground level, where people inhabit the public realm. So that's all I need to understand. Thanks.
Thanks, Professor Ashraf. I'd now like to invite here Professor Fuad Hassan Mallick to give a short presentation.
I didn't want to be the first to put me on the spot. You know about one, this image is what's that? So I'll just pick random images. No. Is that there? Right. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, but it's random images to sometimes illustrate what I want to say. Transformations do take place all the time, everywhere, people, cities, anywhere. We are talking about cities, and what I'm going to talk about is, I won't say focus, but one of the issues that Hassan brought up. I will expand on that, and something that interests me. Not that one. They're not in sequence.
Ah, okay.
I have to search for.
Escape then.
Where is it?
Okay, escape দিয়ে তারপরে
I want everything here.
Yes, it's not. It's not. Remember the one we cannot say?
Okay. Okay, there it is. This is a image, conjecture of Mohenjo-daro 4,500 years ago. Whether it was like that or not, we don't know, but the artist thought it was like that. And that was 4,500 years ago, and sorry, I have to. So it's transformed into this now, 4,500 years later. So why? What was the reason for this transformation? Historians seem to be baffled by what really happened. Some people call it there was a war or something. Some people died, but they're not sure. Others say, and that's what the thing that I want to believe in, it was climate. Climate changed. Right? And there's a book that I came across called How Climate Changed Civilization. And we know that because of shifts in climate, we talk about climate change now a lot, right? Climate has always changed. This place wasn't habitable anymore. Why? One reason they say that the climate became harsh and people couldn't live there. Another is that flooding. This place is to be flooded a number of times a year. And with flood came disease, which happens now also with climate change. You get pollution, you get disease, you get respiratory disease, you get cholera or whatever. So what I want to talk about is the environment, how transformation affects the environment around us, and some say sustainable environment, so forth. But now we are actually better off. We are better than before. So imagine a place like this, which is the desert, all right? Which is the desert, which was sort of not habitable hundreds of years ago. But soon, I've lost my. Sorry about this. Okay. And then you could actually transform it to a place for habitation where people would live in the desert this way. And then eventually in this century you could actually convert, it would become something like this. So that is a transformation of the desert. Why is it becoming like that? Why did Mohenjo-daro disappear? Because you have the means and the technology to make something like that and live there. Right? Because you have technology which allows you air conditioning, etc., and all that. And you can make roads and cars and you can live there. To the extent that you end up making something like this, a transformation of the desert to this. This is downtown Doha, all right? And you have there lots of buildings which are energy guzzlers, so to speak, all right? Because they're not sensitive to the environment. They are also, the buildings and the traffic and the car are greenhouse gas emitters, all right? Carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, and so forth. They contribute to global warming. And that is causing effect not only in the city, but it's transforming the world in terms of sea level rise, disaster events, so on and so forth. So what I'm trying to get at is that these kind of concerns are going to probably may give rise to a new kind of urban idea, so to speak. All right. Whether that's feasible or not, whether it will happen in the future is for us to debate. Here is a picture from our city, Dhaka, and you know this place, right? So what is the big deal about this picture? You see that little bay is land reclaimed, taken from the lake. So what has happened? You have displaced the environment. There was an environment there of water, plants, insects, fish, all that. You've actually displaced it without making sure what's going to happen to that displaced environment. You didn't bother because you were after urban development money, real estate or whatever. So, and you have, this is, this looks like a Photoshop image. It's not, it's real. It's from, I think, one of the African capitals where this kind of situation coexists with this kind of situation. So you have a disparity for that. This deals with the environment in another way, this deals with the environment in another way. This deals with machine cooling, CFCs and so on, not CFCs. This deals with bad environmental quality. So transformations could actually, we have that here as well. Just next to the image I showed you before is this. How many people? 300,000 people living there, right? Very tight places, low, very dense. Environmentally not very healthy. So how do we deal with this? It brings me back to an image which is
La ville radieuse, Le Corbusier.
Sorry?
La ville radieuse.
Yes, La ville radieuse. Yeah, which is an idea from Le Corbusier. Now, I think that idea had some merit in it because it gave you more land, went up, I don't know if Corbusier thought about the environment. Maybe he did. He did about open land, and maybe we could actually revisit that kind of situation. And what are we getting now? Instead, we have this image was, I think, it was shown before. So what do we have here? We have concrete, mass, building, heavy. What does it do? It heats up, very simply. It heats up. It becomes hot, all right? And then it releases the heat, causing climatic dysfunction. I would imagine that if hot air rises at night, then cool air would come in, but it doesn't, because time is too short for that to happen. So, what do you get? You get this urban heat island effect, where the temperature of a city is higher than the surroundings. And this causes a dysfunctional climatic situation. There's an imbalance of heat. So, all right. And I know from a study in Dhaka done very long time back, I think 1996, where it was found that the Tejka industrial area is about 2 degrees centigrade higher than Gazipur at the same time. I don't think it's the case anymore because the industries of Tejka have gone away. But overall Dhaka, I imagine the amount of concrete has increased there. So you get, and this is not only the heat, it's also disease, it's also energy. Even if you are hotter, you need more air conditioning, things like those. All right? And you mentioned that air conditioning, although good for us, we are comfortable, but in the long run can have some problems. All right? Now, what do we do? Many solutions. People, every day almost, they come up with a new solution. This is what we ought to do. This is what we ought to do. And I think the reason I'm talking about this is because this may give rise to a new kind of ideas. These are white roofs. Right? I think Tokyo, the city I read recently, is planning to paint the whole city white. Why? To reduce albedo, or which is increase in reflectivity, so the city doesn't get hot. Yeah, which is why people in the desert wear white clothes, because you reflect off the heat. So this is an idea. Okay. It may not work in cold countries because in the winter you want the heat, but in hot climates it might work. And then you get all kinds of, I'm sorry, I've lost it again. No, I found it. So you get these ideas floating all over the place of the green city, all right? Now what we take green literally, means green, all right? Green is green. Green is not green. Green is many other things. Underneath this green business is a lot of other issues. Water, sanitation, hygiene, health, so many, transportation, everything. So making the thing green is not at ease. But now you have this trend of architects, planners, whoever, talking about green cities. A lot of people talk about it. A lot of people talk about green cities. Some people talk in a peaceful way, some people talk in a bigger way. So this might for a moment seem to the future of cities. But is it so? I'm not sure. This is a question I want to put to all of you. Sorry, I didn't practice this before. Okay. Or habitat like that looks very nice. Green, living with nature and all that. But is this the answer? I'm not sure. Am I taking too long? So the answer is something that we need to see. Is it what we see, or is it what we believe? Is it what we see, or is it what we believe in? So the final, what I will leave with is transformation, therefore, has environmental consequences. Right? Not all of which is understood very clearly by all of us, not by scientists, not by architects and engineers. We need to dig deeper, and importantly, we need to ask ourselves, what do we want for the future? What is the future city going to look like? We have many images, I said, green, this, that, water, but we need to rediscover all this and not take it on face value. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Professor Mallick. I'd now like to invite our last panelist of today's discussion to give a short talk or presentation if he has any. Ehsan Khan.
Thank you. Thank you, Ridwan, to be with us here in Dhaka. It was a fantastic experience. I was in Morocco a couple of days back, and we met Hassan Radoine over there. We had one evening with different issues. We talked about different issues, and we got interested to hear from him more. That's why Mr. Khaled invited him over here. I think next couple of days he will have good conversation with students regarding the transformation of our city over here. My experience in Morocco was also have huge impact on my understanding about city. I found the cities over there in Marrakesh and Fez is fantastic. It looks like they are living forever over there. That what we don't experience over here in Dhaka. Dhaka is changing every day, every second, every minute. And Fez and Marrakesh, the city looks very sustainable. The people over there, they are living there for, I can say, forever. the older people, the young youth, they are having life over there. They are doing their business for years, for many years. The craftsmen are there, their business entities are there, still very viable for the modern world. That was very interesting experience I had, and I have not been there or that kind of environment for a long period. Probably I have seen a couple of cities in a small part, probably in Indian subcontinent, some places, but the whole city like Marrakesh and Fez is fantastic, and the way they transformed their city with the modern needs, that is also interesting. Like we had been to some of the places, palaces, we lived over there, it transformed into a hotel. The riads, the courtyard houses are transforming day by day. They have places where you can have tea, coffee, you can have cultural performances in riads or any other dars. The courtyard houses still very vibrant, and the users, the neighbors, they're also there. So they're having life together. That was a very important example, I think, for this new world. Regarding Dhaka, this is very challenging. Most of the things Hassan Radoine pointed out over here, those are very much established, and probably those should be very much specific to our context also. That should be there. I can point out a couple of things which is very much important for Dhaka. The critical issues like high population and rapid urban growth. Probably nobody can imagine this kind of development. I don't know where it is happening throughout the world. Probably Dhaka is the most growth rate in the whole world right now. The expansion at the periphery, it destroying everything around it. We are experiencing it every day. You can see at the edges where we had lakes, we had water bodies, we had forests, we had agricultural lands transforming probably in fastest manner. So those things has to be taken care of. How we can think about those development or transformation. The wetlands and encroachment is become the main primary new settlement areas. That has to be addressed. How we can preserve wetlands, at the same time the growth, we can allow growth of the cities. That is, we have to think about it. The Dhaka, the way it grown, it's like a spontaneous manner. We had master plans done by foreign experts, but those could not work. Those did not work because of the implementation process, and so also those did not engage the users that Hassan already mentioned. So those has to be done in a manner so that people of the city get involved into this transformation process or in the planning process. We have a couple of planned urban areas, like you mentioned, zoning. We had residential zones, but this Dhanmondi was one of the oldest planned residential zone. It was made for only residences. Now it became a chaos. Sometimes it is interesting because all these other activities fuse into it because of the need of the citizens. But we can think of how we can develop the environment considering this new or required functions or activities over here. The major element, I think, the attitude of development and the attitude of citizens. We don't have ownership. We own only our apartments probably. We don't own our street. We don't own our playfields. We don't own our open areas. That's why open areas every day transform into other functions. Though cities need open areas, open spaces for people's gathering, for play, for recreation, everything. So, because we don't own, other than our personal possession element like residence, we are destroying urban spaces. This is, we have to think about how we can build our ownership into the city facilities or amenities. So I think we should focus, along with this, we should focus on a couple of things. For this, already it has become a mega city, so we can think in two ways. In mega manner, like we have to think big, and at the same time we have to think the smaller parts of the city, like the small spaces, unutilized or or wrongly utilized spaces. We can transform those spaces into a living corners so that the city can become vibrant in the human scale, and also for city as a global position, it can work. So we have to think about transportation system which will connect throughout the country and also regionally throughout the region of, within the global scenario. We don't have quality housing policies. We should think about typologies for all, how we can, we have apartments or houses, but we don't have neighborhoods. That is one important thing for Dhaka, I think. We should think of typologies which will bring again the traditional neighborhood spirits. Public open space, I already told, that has to be the primary objective should be there for transforming the city, considering Dhaka. Urban waters and play areas or fields or green areas. This is one of the important area. I was lucky to be involved into two urban open areas like Dhanbandi Lake area and also Hatirchil urban lake area development. I had very peculiar experience while doing that. Dhanbandi Lake, it was a residential area, so water body inside the residential zone, it was part of the master plan, but it was segregated through fences for a long period, and it became a dumping area and crime zone. Later, when we got we were involved, we demolished all the walls, but we had to put low-level fences for certain kind of protection from the users. That is the problem of citizen psyche, I think, in Dhaka. Any public facilities, from the administrative point of view, we have to protect it. Instead of engaging, instead of building ownership, we put it aside from their possession. That is one challenge. But somehow, though it is a low-level fences, it worked. But while I was doing in Hatirchil project, regenerating the urban open space, it was there, lying over there for hundreds of years, the water channel. But later, when it was encroached by the different interest group, while government took it took it for development, we started integrating around these neighborhoods, and we wanted, and we proposed actually to make an urban district to integrate the citizen around it. But later, during the construction process, even at later stage, after opening up this waterfront for Dhaka, inland waterfront, they started building walls, and they made it wall around the lake area. And again it became another isolated space, not separating from the users around it. For the idea is to protect it. They wanted to, the administration wanted to protect it. Though we, several times we told them we should engage, we should have an integration with the whole city, which will generate new urban spirit over there. So that's how it works. Sometimes probably we need to have integration with the policymakers, professionals, or society users together. Then probably we will brought down the barriers of the negative urban transformation issues. I think we will have an interesting conversation over here today and also in future with them. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ehsan Khan. Belongingness may be the biggest thing what you can involve to protect urban areas or public areas. Before we go into discussion, would Mainata Basum want to say something? Okay, that was Professor Ashraf's idea. Anyway, we have around 40 minutes. We can now go into the discussion session. I'd now like to invite back Ehsan Khan, Professor Hassan Radoine, and Saif here to take a seat and start the discussion today.
There isn't much left to discuss, or we have a lot to discuss. Can I have the microphone? No, it's coming. Thank you, everyone, especially Hassan. You made a wonderful presentation. In fact, covered a lot of ground there. We all have been talking that we live in a transforming environment. There's no doubt about that. It's our built environment, our natural environment. When Fuad was showing the image of Mohenjo-daro, there's something to think about. A city that was such a flourishing establishment all of a sudden vanished. And the next moment when he was showing the images of Doha, which is again something which was probably a very desert environment and then has transformed into something like that. And who knows what in 3,000 years where we'll be. But we're talking about now. Now, meaning was the range of time that we are taking into consideration. Here is the city where we are having this discussion, which is dated. The records can be definitely traced up to 400 years, and people say that it's much older than 400 years. The building that we're sitting is probably constructed was in the 60s as a residential building. It has not been taken down. Most of the buildings in this neighborhood have been taken down, replaced with much higher multi-story buildings. This has been transformed into an institutional setup. This used to be a residential building. So living in a transforming environment there is this question that how rapid the transformation is happening. Cities, I mean, like if we look into London or New York, probably the changes that we have been seeing in the last few decades, it's also changing, but not as noticeable as it is happening here in Dhaka or in Mumbai, which are rapidly changing in the last few decades. It is altering the entire appearance of the city. And when Hassan mentioned about calling this transformation not urban or rural, but making it more broad, like a territorial transformation, you look into it, when Fuad said about environmental transformation, talked about transformation of the quality of air, transformation of the changes in rainfall and other aspects which at times are not visible. My question to all of you who have presented is that, and again taking cue from Hassan's presentation, talking about quality of life. I mean, we are all this arrangement of city and our habitats are primarily focused for human beings. And everything that we have been doing for a better human life, the changes that we are experiencing. I mean, we do care about other species, we don't neglect them, but it's only primary objective is how to make the life of humans on Earth better. So that means this is where we are now. We want to live better. So how do we identify the better life? What are the indicators of a better life? Better human life, better Earth, better. So I think that is something we need to have before we embark on a plan or design. What will be those indicators? The UN has had, earlier it had MDG, now it has got SDG. The objective is to improve the quality of life. Objective is to create a more inclusive society, reduce gaps, reduce disparities, and all these things. So how can our environment have that? When we have these goals to attain, we commit ourselves for attaining this. Probably we don't achieve everything. But how do we measure that it has got better or it has got worse? Here in Bangladesh, we've been experiencing tremendous economic growth. We have a very vibrant city, as you observed. You saw people, everybody's busy. Nobody is sitting back. But we have complaints, we have frustrations. It takes hours for us to reach from one point to another. The houses are cramped, there's not much there. We are dependent more on this consumption of energy to keep ourselves comfortable, and that is also beyond affordability of. So, I think when we are looking into more inclusive way, we need to identify all these indicators and parameters. And where does an architect come in? I mean, it's not a job of only an architect. Architect is one part of it. Before I think that let us talk about how architects can participate. I mean, we have been involved all along, but probably the results that has happened so far has not been satisfaction. So that's why we are again coming back to it, and we're going back, as you said, that we were sustainable But then again, we forgot, we lost our way, and now we're talking about sustainability. So, how do architects get involved in creating that vision of the future territorial transformation that includes all the aspects, all the complexities, whether it's the social, whether it's health, environment, open space, wetland, how does architect and how does it get done? I mean, you have outlined beautifully the 6 points for urban transformation, and I think that it covers almost everything. But let us again try to see from here in Dhaka's context, maybe in Morocco's context, in other. So if we can start by how can architects, I mean, the image of Corbusier, Villa Reveals, says that Corbusier had a vision of the future urban habitat. This is how Paris could be transformed, a future city could look. So what is the future city or future territory that we are looking into? So what sort of a future territory is we are looking into?
In the context of Dhaka, I think the life over here in Dhaka, people at certain level, they like to be in Dhaka, and many people around Dhaka, like around within Bangladesh, they wanted to come over here in Dhaka, mainly probably 3 reasons. One is to have work. Second is healthcare and education. In context of comparing other cities of Bangladesh, Dhaka has most of the things. Also, location-wise, Dhaka is very much centrally oriented, very within the proximity of major rivers, Padma, Meghna, Jamuna. That's how Dhaka started and Dhaka growing still now. During our modern development, I can say British period probably, roads started. Developing roads, roads and rail tracks, and we started forgetting our rivers. Though the whole Bangladesh is a riverine country, and for thousands of years we used to be with rivers and lakes and canals. Those are part of this topography and geographical situation, and we started forgetting those, and we built up huge concrete blocks, considering the central location around Dhaka. That become a challenge for to live in Dhaka. So my understanding is we are happy with Dhaka if we can have, if we can preserve our natural context. That is one point. Probably we can revive our lakes and waterways or riverine lifestyle that was there for thousands of years. One point. Another point is if we can face the challenges of modern amenities or needs like social spaces, social interaction spaces or activities, then probably people will be happy to live over here in Dhaka. So envisioning new Dhaka or quality Dhaka for future, probably we have to revive our city waters, city greens, and public interaction spaces around the city, and with other infrastructure facilities like communication and technological connectivity with technologies. I think we will be happy to claim as a livable city.
Okay, preserving natural environment, improving infrastructure are ways. But at times, I think when we talk about preservation of natural environment, in a city like Dhaka, there is this pressure of accommodating all these people. So we're kind of forced into altering that natural environment. And human habitat is created by changing natural environment. I mean, unless you want to live in jungle or caves, or the moment you start building, constructing, you change. So if I put it like that, you look towards a city where you'll find a balance between the natural and the man-made. Something like that, is that you are trying to say? And which has the right kind of infrastructure, transportation, communication, all this. Is that a kind of city? Yeah. Okay. But Hassan, you have, covered, you've given us 6 points for sustainable territorial development. But tell me about that city. Once we have realized how that city is going to be like. Say, in Morocco, you have such wonderful existing cities, which both Ghazi and Ehsan were talking about, where so well preserved, and yet all the contemporary life is happening, and I'm sure that it will continue. Here in Dhaka, I feel quite sort of sad at times to see this transformation by taking down all these buildings, all these things that we have built over the years, and they're just erased because we want to accommodate more people. And all of a sudden, the city that I had experienced in the 60s or 70s, that doesn't exist anymore. There's a new city. Okay, great, we need to have so many people here. So I'd like to know that, Hassan, one is that the future city out of your 6 points, how can you describe? I know you can't draw it out here, or you can. The other thing is that how to continue the transformation and also maintain the link with the past. I mean, keeping this is, I feel, that very much at stake here in Dhaka. Hassan, is that okay?
We have a good moderator. Good. From where to start? I think, in literature of criticism, always, we move to the essentials. Sometimes there are so many issues layered, accumulated, and then you say what is right, what is not right. So you try to take away all the residues to see what is right. And I think this is now the problem of the city. The city is becoming very overwhelming. And then the different layers built on the city, its capacity cannot handle that kind of performances with us. And what I would say, let's go to the essential. What is the essential? A territory, a resource, and a user. There is no difference with the past, or even the most primitive settlements in history. You have the human being in nature, exploring that nature for the well-being, but it was receiving and giving, and the exchange was biological. With the industrialization, and look now, if you remember the railway station, how it changed the image of the city. So we're not anymore in a little hamlet or a village in a countryside where there is this smooth biological exchange between nature and the user, the city became the only opportunity. And this is a problem. If we want to predict the future of the city, so that what are the opportunities of this user to gain life without getting to the economics machine. I think this economics machine of profit, and when the city became the machine of the profit, so therefore we stepped on other qualities just to make the city working for one target. And the market became the city. So now residential areas, now that, and commerce is invading everywhere. If I give the example of Dhaka, and by the way, in Morocco we have lots of problems, maybe it's sad, and we hide that to see them. Thank you for saying good things. But let me tell you here, I really congratulate you what you're doing in Bangladesh. You're talking about 180 million. We're 33 million, all right? And we have actually, maybe we criticize the protectorate or the presence of the French in Morocco, but they left something good, which is territorial planning. What is territorial planning? Instead of relying on one city for the whole country, like Egypt, they are 80 million and they have one city, Cairo. Alexandria, they are very small. Bangladesh, 180 million, and you have Dhaka. So that myth of Dhaka, or Dhaka should be demystified, to be what less, should reduce the pressure on the city. Whatever solutions, whatever technology you bring, whatever thing, if Dhaka remains with its density, it will not work. Because if you step out of your apartment, is another planet. This is what I realize here. So therefore, the territory, how much resource we use, and the user, how we optimize the use of that resource within the carrying capacity of the territory. It's very important. So I'm not here being futuristic or utopic, but I think what kind of resolutions, and some they can be top down, maybe creating new satellite towns, maybe dividing, not dividing in terms of fragmentation, but just say we have some districts that we are actually trying to make them perform well. So that performance, what is about to make the city perform well. Because when you look at Dhaka, there is no single street that is not influenced. In some, you go to Paris or London, even New York, very busy, there are just parts of the cities, they are like Dhaka. But Dhaka is, the whole thing is Dhaka. There is no, you know what I'm saying? Even if you are in a posh, rich, whatever thing, but you are in a tram, in a grid of streets that makes the whole scape the same in Dhaka. And I think this is overwhelming. The number two, I think very important for the future resolutions, the link between informal and formal, informality and formality. I think most decision makers, they always, if they want to project the better future of the city, then they go what? To a protocol to make it formal. And it's like the formal is the solution. And then we worsen the situation because the informal lacks the formal. Yeah? And all these, merchants, I mean, this lady, I like the picture very much. You know what? Put your wall, posh wall, stone, you have the curb, the street, maybe limousine or Mercedes, I don't know what, is moving. This lady, she's there. She's defining her own space, and this is why I will borrow this term, placemaking. Placemaking. There is a whole theory of placemaking, though it's not now new, it's becoming old. I think how can we make a place, and there is three terms here, I may use them. There is a place, and lieu, and milieu. Milieu is the ecosystem, is a place with environment that becomes a milieu, What is an ecosystem? Is a living metabolism within a place. Designers, they design a place which is physical, but there is no milieu, no life. So this is the major problem for the future. What is not using informal, condemning people because they don't have means, and the city is theirs. Anyone in Dhaka who is walking in the street belongs to him or her. So if you name that person informal because he is conducting an activity, that is wrong. And I remember in the 70s when the informal, shanty towns and slums, they were destroyed by governments, and then the United Nations intervened by right, international. You cannot destroy the shelter of any person, even on an informal land. What it means? It means this is the problem of a higher authority to shelter everyone. And now in Morocco, just to let you know, in our new constitution, 2011, housing is not anymore a need in Morocco. Is a right. Is a right. It's written in one of the articles of the Constitution. Housing is a right. And if there is no shelter for all, the city will be in trouble. No question. So to resolve this question of formal, informal, the last point, and I will stop. I think it's hard to answer your question. You put me in a very tough situation. But I will just mention last point about this question of, I had a research proposal with one professor, a colleague of mine, Richard Devine from Kentucky University, and we were working on a very interesting subject, sustainable area budget. What is sustainable area budget? Sustainable area budget, when you have an urban territory and you have a boundary, and then you can manage the in and out. What resources you get in? All. It can be energy, it can be goods, it can be food. This is the city. The city has a scheme like the human body. And you feed it, and there is waste. So this question of feeding and expulsing makes the metabolism of the city. The only thing there is vitamins that goes to the metabolism, but sometimes you don't even consume the vitamins because they are so distracted by a lot of things. So I'm here very theoretical, but sustainable area budget, if we get to assess the performance of the urban metabolism of cities, and this is why I end by this very last sentence, data, smart tools for assessment, smart orientations, not control. I'm not saying here control because this can be, I know in some countries getting very crazy with smart tools, following people and purchasing, but I think I will end here. I think this question of what we gain from what we get inside and what we get out and what value we create. I will add one last sentence. In Africa, you know that Africa is the most the continent where you have the most construction in the planet. If you look at the quantity of concrete used by Africa, is the highest. But when you look at the outcome, which kind of cities they are building? They are building dormitory cities. They are not building cities of opportunities. So here, this dynamics of Dhaka, I could see a lot of opportunities, but they are not organized. Opportunities, I will stop here, and Fuad, I'm sure he has another lecture.
I have a quick answer.
He has another, so I respect
I think Hassan, without drawing in, it really painted a beautiful picture. The things that you have mentioned, some of the things that we're already discussing here, particularly with the Bengal Institute, about having distributed settlements rather than this concentrated, as opposed to the concentrated, the private city things. And for the last few years, the research and design section have been looking into it. But we're very much convinced that that is probably the future. We have to have distributed. And today, with so much technological development, especially in communication technology, the entire idea of working and being concentrated in, is no longer there. You can operate from anywhere. It depends what you're involved in. And I mean, if you look at this Amazon company, I mean, they've all totally changed the scenario of shopping. No longer there are shops. They have all these vast storages, they have all these drones and other things of changing. So I think that it's very important for us to identify where we are heading to and what the future, especially the technological transformation, and how that can result into the habitat and distributed. And the other issue that you mentioned about flexibility as opposed to rigidity. When you have this formalized approach, when you have this plans and zones and everything fixed and rigid, probably majority of the people lose the very essence of human life, freedom. I mean, Qazi's photograph expresses that fantastically. The freedom of choosing a place to do that work. It's such a beautiful thing. I think that we impose too much restrictions on ourselves when we are creating our habitat, our living environment. We fix everything. This is it. This is how it. So probably we need to develop a system where we allow that space, that freedom, and then we also have certain common accepted rules. What Ehsan was saying, that we do not have he felt that there is no collective ownership. So I'm sure that one can look into that. How do we, it's not one individual city, it's all of us. That's how it is. So we have to devise a way of collective ownership, how we can create an environment which allows that flexibility, that freedom to express, to carry out one's life. And I'm so happy to know that Morocco has adopted that as part of the constitution as a right. The other day when we were discussing about subaltern, saying that our constitution also mentions that state takes the responsibility towards the citizen. At least the Constitution of 1972 has said that when it comes to shelter, it's the responsibility of the state, so that no citizen is without a shelter. Anyway, Fuad, I'm sure that you'll be touching on the environmental aspects, how the future. I mean, we are in a critical situation. You say that it's nothing new. The climate has been changed. It has not been always like this, and climate is probably changed. So how do you visualize the future environment? I mean, it gets warmer, hotter, the sea level rises, and what is the future of human habitat in that condition? We are not being able to reverse that. I don't know, is there any, we're not being able to freeze all those the icebergs that has melted, and so how do you see the future habitat like? How do you see the future in that changing environmental situation?
I think not as bad as people would say. You have to have faith on people's consciousness. People are conscious about what's happening with the environment, generally conscious. Whether this consciousness is comprehensive or not is something else. But I think people are conscious. They are aware of these things. We are all, the young children, the younger generation, aware of the environment. Very much so. I mean, it's drilled into you, like anywhere you go, products, stuff. But I think this consciousness has to be comprehensive. We tend to take a piecemeal attitude towards consciousness. Right? For example, oh, solar, great, I have solar, and all the problem is solar. You have to be comprehensive. Solar has its issues, it has problems of its own, right? We say solar is good, but what about solar panels are not biodegradable, solar is expensive, solar is batteries, and blah, 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 and so on. So the consciousness has to be overall, right? On a macro level, not on a piecemeal. We are conscious about, water shortage, water supply, we're shortage about pollution and that. But look at this. Are we conscious? We are not. Thousands and millions of these go down there. And we're going to leave here with this amount of water, if you drink some more, that much, and you leave it here, right? That's why conscious, that's why we have smaller ones, 250. I want to talk a bit about the quality of life you mentioned. What is a good quality of life? I think it's very relative. Our fathers tend to believe that they had a better quality of life. We tend to believe that we had a better quality of life than these. It's very relative. I think they have a better quality of life. They have mobile phones, they have information, they have access to God knows what, right? What is the issue, I think, for me, is health. Good health. That is what you guys don't have. You have better health care. The reason you have better health care is because you don't have good health. So I think that is going to be the issue. There are going to be solutions to this all this. But one of the problems of modern cities is they promote bad health. Right? And particularly in our cities. Right? Not in Western cities, not in Western. They are very conscious. 1952, London was foggy for 5 days. They had electricity around. Finished. Problem is solved. So, but in our case, it's actually, health. So you need to have an overall consciousness. What is happening? Not peacefully. See the whole scenario, and you have the resource. You have the knowledge. You have the resource. You have the means. You have the technology. You have these, which are push of a button can give you information, but also be careful. It gives you a lot of wrong information. I think consciousness is the key thing. And you also mentioned what should architects do? Consciousness again. Again, be very conscious about what you do. Every line you draw has significance to the environment. Everything you build, everything you construct has consequences of pollution, energy, resource. Everything you do, you have to think the whole picture. What are you doing, to what end, and what effect it's going to have on the future generations. The whole sustainable business came up in the 1980s, and the key word is that leave a good future for the future. And it's up to you. We haven't been in that thought process, but it's your thing. And the other thing, and the other word, which my pen didn't work very well, but I can see it, empathy. Be aware of what and then this brings you to, this point was brought to me when you talked about formal and informal, it's connectivity informal. And that's when empathy plays a role. You have to have an empathy towards people around you. Consciousness, empathy. These two things together, I think, problem solved. And I think the problem is going to be very serious. I think climate change was overplayed last couple of years. You see, don't hear about it anymore. Not much.
No, I think we are really covering a lot of ground here. And what Fuad has mentioned, we have always talked about it, but probably we again forget. We have this tendency to forget. We just keep reminding ourselves of implications of our actions. What we are doing, how does it affect the future? If I put up a building somewhere, what happens in the future of that building? So, when we look into this problem-solving things, how much we need to keep in mind that I mean, apart from all the things that it is expected to solve, what other problems it is going to create. So, I mean, we do all this kind of studies, impact assessment and all this stuff. And how, probably we did not do that kind of studies, that's what that might have resulted, but probably from now on, as we know that we can study, we can simulate.
Yes.
I mean, if you put up a building here, what affects the air, the traffic, and all these things. So the future transformation probably can be more studied beforehand through simulators, though it's not going to give you everything right away. It might happen, it can go wrong. But I think that what mentions here is an interesting point. The other thing that he talks about is health. Very important. No? We would like to be healthy. We have fantastic, busy, bustling cities. I know that we are all unhealthy people. Mental health? Not physical. Physically we are not fit.
Oh, we're not.
We're not? Okay. So health is an issue. So how about formulating kind of a guideline towards a healthy city? That at the end, the physical form is there. No? So how do you actually make a healthy city? How can we design a city which is for healthy living? How they can be put into some kind of rules or points, something like that, so we can create. So I think healthy city and what brings in good health, that type of thing. But lastly, Fuad, I would like to say one thing, because we all, Fuad and Qazi and we all studied in the school at the same time. When you mentioned about consciousness, I've been reminded of something that we were doing back in the 80s. We started a study group, circle, and when it came to naming the group, we were a little bit, what shall we call ourselves? We needed to call ourselves. And we chose this Bangla word called Chetana. And Chetana is the Bengali for consciousness or awareness. So way back in the 80s, we were talking about it, and then it keeps coming again back. Khalid, you have the rest of the time to, and Tawhid is liberal about that when it comes to Qazi. No, but I'm sure that you can.
Anything in particular?
You can pick up on the things that we have discussed and also pick up on the things that have been presented before, and maybe
I'll pick up on what you started off with, quality of life, which Fuad also picked up on. Because I think it's kind of connected to transformations, understanding transformation, because we need to understand, what urban transformation is. We think we know, just the physical change, as I mentioned, change to the skyline, change to the street, more motor cars, that's kind of one kind of transformation. But I think we need to understand the drivers of transformation. You look at cities across the globe, there are different ways of cities are being transformed. Furiously, as in Dhaka or in China, or less furiously, but still changing in Marrakesh and Fez. And you go to Manhattan, since going to the United States, I've been going to Manhattan every year. The city has been the same, more or less, kind of new buildings popping up here and there very carefully. There's a high line and all that. But I think the framework of the city, the morphology of the city is the same. What transforms, interestingly, in Manhattan at the street level, new stores popping up. You go there one store and next year there's another store because that has gone bankrupt or anything. So what I'm saying is the texture of transformation is very different in different cities. Whereas Euro-American cities have become more or less static, and I have to be careful about saying that, but still transformations are happening. But compared to that, what's happening in most Asian cities, furious transformation. I think we need to then understand what are the drivers of transformation, which I said earlier that's related to what one might call quality of life. So not quality of life, but it's the fiction of the quality of life, the myth of the quality of life. And I think that is manufactured. So cities have fictions. Dhaka is not just a pragmatic city that everybody is running around doing business, earning money, living in whatever manner, including a young lady. But the young lady was driven to the city by a fiction. We live in the city because of certain fiction, which goes back to Joseph Raper's idea, cities must have myths and fictions, and there is. And we need to and there's not one myth or fiction about Dhaka. Maybe there is one hegemonic myth, one primary myth. This is what Dhaka is about. And if we don't get to the bottom of that, I don't think we'll be able to understand, what drives those transformations. So again, a Ricordian term, seduction of place. So we are seduced not by the physical city, but by that fiction of the quality of life. Whether you have it or not, but you have that fiction and you pursue that. And by saying that it is manufactured, the quality of life, especially in Dhaka, it's constantly manufactured. Consciously, unself-consciously, legally, illegally, mostly by real estate developers these days. 30 years ago, there was no real estate developer in the big sort of forefront. I mean, they're the ones who are the drivers of transformation in Dhaka. I don't know about other cities, but I know about other cities. But I mean that in Dhaka, the myth is manufactured primarily by the real estate developers. So here is the quality of life. Okay, here is your tall building. Here is your apartment. And unlike the other guy over there, I'll give you a swimming pool in the 12th floor. Okay, and you have your car park 3 floors, and so on and so forth. So those are models that get sold. Whether you can buy it or not, that's another thing. And then there are other sort of small, this is the predominant model. So in a sense, the city is not built by bricks and mortars, but by myths and fictions. And they must be interrogated. They must be first, like any archaeological excavation, they need to be excavated. Okay, here is the myth. And who is driving this myth? And you're asking what should architects do? First, they need to investigate, where are the myths coming from? Because we are participating in that. We are in that original term of the word, collaborators, in perpetuating this myth about the quality of life, which is not really the quality of life, which is a sort of divisive quality of life. So that's one thing. But in a positive tone, I would say that our relationship to the city is erotic. We don't talk about that. It's an erotic relationship. Calm, Bangla Yuri. So I didn't say pornographic, I said erotic. There's a difference between an erotic relationship and a pornographic relationship. I would say that certain cities present a pornographic image, like Dubai. Dubai presents a pornographic image, if I may say so. I don't know what you think about it, because it sells an idea of a city, but then as much as you get close to it, perceiving it, you don't get it. You don't get it. There are a lot of people living in that city, but they're not citizens. They're not participating in the cityness of the city. They are always marginal, even if they're physically in the interior of the city. So I think that this idea of the erotic nature of the city, because I'm drawn to it. I or others need to understand what drives me to the city, draws me to the city, no matter what. Because this sort of fiction, the quality of life is produced at a number of levels. One at the functional level. Okay, the sewage works, the train works, if transport gets resolved, yes, 50% the quality of life will actually change. But that's at the functional level. But there is also the fictional level that needs to be understood also. So if you agree that there is a predominant myth or fiction about the quality of the life in Dhaka, which not all of us are participating in but pursuing, if that's the dominant myth, as architects you're asking finally what we can do. We can produce counter myths, counter narratives. How do we do that? Architects can do that. Architects have historically produced narratives. You don't have to build it. You can build an alternative model which becomes a narrative, well and good, but you can actually talk, write, draw, produce, stand up and produce counter narratives. You can participate in the hegemonic myth and drive your Mercedes, or you can produce counter narratives.
Sometimes you hear some arguments and then you see the alarm inside. Why did you not mention the word quality of life? When quality of life is hijacked by real estaters, and I will sell you good quality of life versus less quality of life that is less expensive. Hence the gated communities, which are a major threat for the city as civitas. The origin of the city was the vehicle to provide a civilization, culture, and the level of conduct of all citizens. They were inspired by the vehicle of the city that provided morale, that provided ethics, that provided a place, that provided a sense of belonging, and hence we need to be very careful about quality of life. I think this is, and even if I tell you the drama, the modern city, its raison d'etre, its cause, was hygiene. Yeah, because the historic city was criticized by all architects. Le Corbusier, he said the old town was like packed donkey, packed donkey. It's donkey's way. Tony Garnier, he read Émile Zola, his father was a worker, a laborer, and he saw the misery of the labor of the city. So he provided us a new industrial city that its main reason of being, hygiene. Hygiene gave us regulations. This is why we draw your plan as an architect, you need to have maximum windows. And sometimes your plan is rejected. And hygiene gets you to lighting, lighting gets you to street, to the curve, to 5 centimeters. So quality of life based on hygiene will lead you to another checkerboard, if I may use Jane Jacobs' term, another military Roman camp city. What I think we should advocate, and I fully agree with my dear Dr. Kazi, I think we need to make distinction between 3 wishes in the city. The daily, that means, and proximity. Before you go to the basilica, it's basilica, but when you are in the neighborhood, in the Medina, we had in fact something called cohesion center. Every neighborhood, like a cell, like a blood cell, with its center in the middle, where you have oven, bakery, Turkish bath, non-polluting activities. They should not get into that cell, because if this cell is contaminated with industrial polluting activity, that means that would not be residential. And hence, it's not quality of life as artificial packaged by a real estater, but rather is the organic well-being that the city is providing as an ensemble, rather than by packaged quality of life. And of course, this future city, it needs to handle its own transformation. If there is Wi-Fi, ICTs, all this technology, we're moving so fast, and there is a problem, a major problem. We are losing adaptation to our own tools. The agrarian society, agriculture, they have a stable for their news, they have their tools of agriculture here, and they are in full harmony with the ecosystem. The problem now, the city that we are making is not in tandem with how advanced technological tools are advanced. And this is why, did you see, I agree with you, I think Fuad mentioned this kind of, you mentioned rapid change. You know what the problem? Temporality, time issue. You have a neighborhood that will become obsolete in less than 10 years, all right? And therefore, I lived in Philadelphia for 6 years. Trust me, it's not a city. All they went to suburbia with their 4-wheel, trucks and whatever, ranches outside. Who lived in downtown in America? Ethnic people coming recently to the city. And downtown Philadelphia, you don't want to be there Sunday. It's scary. No one is there. Because in the suburbia, there is the fancy mall, there is the green landscape, and hence fiction outside of the city. You want to belong to the city, but you want to be in the periphery. You see, but thank you for provoking us. I think this is a good discussion. Thank you.
I just thought about this. Forget, Hassan gave a very interesting idea that maybe the cohesion area, whatever that is, we can call it a neighborhood, sector, and whatnot, that must contain something which makes it cohesive. You introduce something in it, it's like a parasite or a bacteria, like an industry in a neighborhood that destroys it all. So we should know that what makes it cohesive and what makes it sort of transformative in a sort of vulnerable way, right? So, so not all devices and technologies are to be taken as they are given to us, because that's also a fiction. Everybody has a phone now, and not only a phone, it's a smartphone, right?
And we're not using it.
Right, and then we have Facebook, which gets hacked, 50 million Facebook pages hacked. So I'm saying that, thinking that, just an idea that you mentioned that maybe one day in the year Dhaka has a card-free day. We have that actually. On Eid holidays, everybody goes to the village and the city becomes car-free. So, but I mean, rhetorically, we can have a car-free day. And I was then thinking that we can have a internet-free day. Right? No internet in the city. So that might, that might bring people out in the streets and cool the air in ways that.
Well, Harold, you're absolutely right, and I think, was it yesterday or the day before yesterday, at the breakfast table, I have two daughters, and they're always on their thing, and I always say, well, what is this? Come, let's have a conversation, let's say, but somehow it's very difficult to take. In the morning, me and my wife takes a walk around. There's a lake just adjacent to this place. And somehow that particular morning, I had this sort of a, you call that, realization or something, and that there are so many people there in the morning, taking a morning walk and doing some exercise. Or they're just there having their breakfast. There's some stalls over there. There's some other things you can also have, their vegetable stalls, fruit stalls. It's not that everyone knows everyone. Maybe very few, they know each other, but they are interacting. And I was telling them that what a wonderful social space we have. We're talking about all this virtual social spaces where we're connected to someone in Indonesia or Morocco or America. We are conversing, we are participating. But here is a space which is so real. It's everything. Without really knowing or connecting, you feel that you are part of this, the social space where people are interacting. And I don't know, I have to take my question back, is that whether architects have anything to do with the future of the city or not. I know that we can draw out and do things, but what Qazi mentions, probably the future of urban transformation is more with the writers who can write the story of the future based on all these experiences. How much do we experience a city life? What do we do as part of a city environment? And what do we think of the transformation? I think we are only following the client's brief or the city authority's brief. How much we are into the city? How much are we into that place or this shop? This is, I feel it to be very important that unless we are the city inhabitants in that manner, that we are very much part and parcel of the city life, rather than only the people, delineators of city life. I don't think architects will have anything to do. So I'm in a way taking back my question, but I would like exactly. So as usual, we open up the floor, and I said that I will be a little bit generous over here also. So participants, please, if your observations, your questions to the panelists, please ask so that we can get some more response.
I just take a cue on your last saying. I wonder whether what Qazi has mentioned, and you have agreed that whether architects have anything to do with making a city. I sort of believe that yes, we do. We have a great role to play. Perhaps we don't have much of an example in our city that we are sort of believing or less believing the quality and the ability an architect may have. And it is not only the architect's responsibility to build a city, never had been. We are a part of a total package here, or the fabric of making a place. Making place is a collective effort. I mean, you can design a great city, but how you focus to a corner, it perhaps lies in many ways to how an architect may have envisioned that. So I do not agree on the word saying that whether architects have any role to play or not making future cities. I think we do have a great role to play. Another thing I would say, what Fuad sir has mentioned, that we have to be conscious and we have to be aware of things. Yes, of course, but I also think the days of consciousness and awareness it's kind of short now. We have to be proactive. I think it would help to take part into making things, and I think that also comes from the way we've been taught. I think we as an architect, the mostly urban architect, we get to see one side of the coin, and we try to reconcile the way we live in a dense condition, which we term, for better for a better word, urban dwellers. But in many ways, I really like your terminology, territories. So it would be immensely important for an architect's mind to territorialize, go on the other side of things. And it perhaps starts from the academia, where for too long, I think, we've been really pushed into this kind of knowledge that we can solve things, we can see future. But in this very context, in a country like Bangladesh, this is what I'm talking about. I haven't been to Morocco. I should have next time. But I think it would be very important for all the architects to go beyond this urban corridor, to solve the urban corridor. I don't think we wish, we anticipate, I think we feel that we can change and make changes, but we don't know the other side. And without knowing that, it would be very, very difficult to sort of solve our own backyard. And yeah, I think the days of rural versus urban, it needs to be looked at differently. And I think today I heard the different ways a little bit. Territory, we have to expand our imagination, and only then, perhaps only then, we can begin to stitch the broken threads, I think.
I have something very but all of us here engaged in this debate. Thank you for this very important. Thank you for this very important intervention. I think the role of the architect, I said nothing about it, but you really nailed some points. Who is the architect and who is not? For me, everyone is an architect. Ladies are the perfect architects. I mean, in Morocco, if you look how the house is designed, the architect will have a nightmare by transforming his plans 100 times. Now, the task of the architect is getting back to the origin of what the architect, if you look at Vitruvius, if you look at all the treaties, architect was beyond someone who is just drawing. We have a lot of people out there, artists, they can draw. I think the architect is an image of a society. In addition to consciousness, knowledge, is very important. And since knowledge now is fragmented with disciplines, we need to be very multidisciplinary. Schools of architecture, they stop teaching sociology, they stop teaching anthropology, they stop teaching human, whatever, biology, and they stop doing all that. So we have only design, and design became a fiction. And this is why I'm saying always there is a container and the content. So we are so good in designing the container, and we're leaving people to come and see what they would do with that container. It's so fancy, but what for? I lived in UAE for 4 years. I was next to Dubai, Sharjah. Trust me, after 4 years, I felt like my soul will be hijacked. I mean, I will not use the term that used by Kazi, very strong for me, but trust me, and this is why it's actually pushed me to write my book.
Makes my point.
Yes, this is why I wrote my book, Architecture in Context. Some people, they say, oh, Hassan, and by the way, the editor, when I sent the proposal, she was blown away. She came to Dubai, she said that book is a must. Why? Because we cannot teach this new generation of architects going to the atelier, and then worst in French schools, like in Morocco, we have this partie architecturale. Partie architecturale, that means a concept. And then the concept will become a label. Metaphoria will become ecstasy. And then the ecstasy will become something. And the people, they're somewhere else. This is a joke. I think, to go back to the role of the architect, yes, indeed, architect is very important. I worked with master builders in Fez for 10 years. I was very young. I graduated I was 23 years old. And then when I was following up these master builders, they don't have, maybe they were drawing, because I've done a survey afterwards. I realized that they are very good in sketching, they are drawing, but they are using three-dimensional thinking about the building. They never looked at 2D, a plan, and the plan is a star. You know? If you look at the plan and you find it as a star, or is a square with a square, and the edge, and then the edge will become a balcony, what kind of architecture is this? I think architects, they need to be very knowledgeable, they need to be very good in communication, they need to listen to people, and by the way, we should not also blame the architects, we blame also the citizens. In my city, the old town Fez, every owner of the house, he will build his own house like he's tailoring his jacket. We don't have two houses similar in Fez. We don't have them. This, what you call the housing patterns, and you have one plan for 100 people the same, with a facade, postmodernist, fictionist, name them, and with all these slogans, and we have this exhibitionist, architecture, nonsense. And all they take a professional photographer and they take nice photograph to be admired by home, by another architect. Because the layman in the street, they will not understand this bloody edge in glass. They don't care. I was going with my father saying, oh, look at this angle. Excuse me, son, what are you talking about? It was like my second year of architecture. Said something wrong happened. Imagine in my second year of architecture, I started criticizing buildings. To cut my story short, I think this happened not only in architecture, music, the laymen, the normal people, they were understanding music. The player will play, but the listener will compose. So now architecture hijacked from the users and becoming institutionalized. I will use métier for maybe I will get too rough on saying that. When the métier, the discipline, was institutionalized, we lost the architect. And this is why the most famous architects, they got out of academies. Le Corbusier is not the product of a classical school. Frank Lloyd Wright the same. So the brightest architects, they were out of the box. Then just follow, this kind of, I am now devising a curriculum for a school, trust me, is a nightmare. They got me accreditation and they applauded. Wow, Hassan, fantastic, but trust me, the recipe how to make an architect is the most difficult one. Thank you, I'm talking to you. You know who I am. You're not. I'm trying to. Yes, the audience, please.
Yeah, some other people actually.
I'll take another question. Muntakim? No, you're looking at the camera. Come on, Muntakim, we should have one. Sabia, you want some question?
Sir, I have some.
What? How much?
Thank you very much for the conversation. It was very nice to have. In my understanding, the transformation in Dhaka city has become to a scale that is not controllable anymore. So I think the architects need to interfere in urban planning, in decision making and policy making, because I think Dhaka has been too much generous, allowing everyone to come in, and there is no such policy. The population is making all the problems, in my understanding, because whatever we want to do, even as you mentioned, in Haque, they are putting the walls to maintain it, not to get dirty or for the maintenance, instead of maintenance. So anything we do, there is always a threat of too much people, and I think this is a major issue to solve or to think about solving, and at the same time, shifting the future and present magnets, which are the working opportunities in Dhaka city. So people who are coming, they will be dispersed in different areas, not only coming for the opportunities in Dhaka city. And also, since I'm living in Dhanmondi since my childhood, I see many problems are getting, like, for example, there's too much cars. There's no policy like a person or a family can have 4, 5, 6 cars. There is no limitation. So I think there's also should be some policies regarding the transport, owning the transport. Like if I want to buy 5 cars, I cannot. There must be some policies. At the same time, inside Dhanmondi, there are so many schools, and for example, for 100 students, there are 100 cars coming to take them. So I think it can be bus for the schools, mandatory. So they are coming and going in area base, like by bus. So there's not 100 cars for 100 students. So in my understanding, I think in policy making, architects have a big role to play, and thus we can hope for, and of course in individual level we have to work on, but in policy making I feel the need, the architects must interfere in that sector. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay.
A lot of things actually. But at the end she rested on the idea that there must be policies about certain things. You know, the city has a lot of policies which are used, misused and all that. Only policies don't help. But you mentioned cars. I think we have, so this is totally different. This is not a response to you. But as an example of fiction, the fiction of cars. I think the biggest transformation to the city has been motor cars, nothing else. The automobile. And we know that how powerful lobbies, motor car lobbies, and then petrol lobbies after that, have consistently, in a very devious way, have thrust the cars in our imagination. Not trains, not mass transit. We know in the United States that there were many railway networks in the eastern coast which were removed by powerful motor car lobbies, the bought off land because, you know, the need for cars. And we know that in Chicago that, you know, the car and the elevator transformed the city. You got the tall buildings because of the elevator and steel structure, and because of the cars you can then move out, and you invented the suburb. So, and then you invented sprawl, otherwise you will have the compact city. So I think we need to find a way of like how to deal with cars. আমাদের একটা ছোটবেলার প্রভাব আছে না লেখাপড়া করেছে গাড়ি ঘোড়া চড়েছে which translates is that whoever studies gets to ride cars. That's what I mean. It's such a subversive, this is a very old proverb. So this is such a subversive one. Yeah, why can't we say লেখাপড়া করেছে mass transit choice? Like, you know, like the movie Mass Transit. You know, so it's like inbuilt in our DNA. You mentioned DNA, that's in our DNA.
Yes, of course. And actually, somebody said the other day that in a developed country, ministers go in public transport. That's how you measure the difference.
Yes, indeed.
Here you have to have a car. Everybody has
That's right.
Yes,
So
indeed.
the American fiction is, this is a blues song, lines from a blues song. I don't have a home, I live in a car. Because you must have a car. You know?
Yeah.
You know,
It's a myth.
The car is shaped America. It can't shape us.
So we have to look into a future, carless future. That's something. Well, I think it's time that we conclude. I'm going to touch on what we discussed, but I'm going to pick up two things again. One is the new architect. I think that the architect as exists today, the architects, I mean, we have architects also sitting in committees, various different committees, but it depends what architect is sitting, how which architect is sitting. I mean, it's not the individual, but what is the training of that architect? What is the learning, the education? I think architecture, education is too specific these days. It's not very general. Literature, music, society, social engagements, everything. I mean, I don't know. We are too much now, especially with technology.
Yes.
We have become more into this screen-generated imagery, not the real tactile and other interactive thing. So if we're looking into the future, a better future, we need to look into a new architect.
New education.
And we have to, especially who are involved in this whole producing the new architects, we have to look into that, what the new architect should learn, should experience, should study. So that's something. Even what we have to unlearn, those who have already become architects, we need to also unlearn and learn. And the other thing that Kazi had mentioned, I think it's absolutely right. The power of fiction, the power of how the stories get ingrained in our mind and that influences our lives. We are driven by this image of a better life which has been sold to us in a manner, before the better life comes, things have already been put into our mind. This is better, the way that it's packaged, its things, images. So architects can start writing. Some of us has already started writing, and we should take it up seriously. The production of this counter myth, I don't think that someone else, the architects, if they are aware that what this myth is doing, this fiction is doing, the writing also has to be by the architect.
You can draw.
By the new architect.
No, but not write. You can draw. You can.
No, that's also storytelling. I mean, how the story does not need to be only told by words, but you can also draw that new story. So I think we have a good warm-up for the session that is going to start. Hassan is going. I'm very thank you so much, Hassan. You have really made the debate very lively, and we can look forward to a very lively week coming forward here in the learning from Aga Khan. We didn't talk much about the Aga Khan projects, but
I have one small addition to the curriculum of new or future architectural education that I would ask an architect or a student to walk for a semester, in a city, because we don't walk around much at all. We imagine from our own, head that we have. So simply walking around the city could be a recording, sharing. So that.
do you have any announcements?
No, we don't have much announcement. Thanks everyone for coming here today. And from tomorrow, Professor Hassan Radoine will start giving his lectures. So we have a little closing program on 2nd October, along with Professor Radoine's talk at Aga Khan Institute. That's on 2nd October, and on 3rd, it's his public lecture at Haque. So you may have to keep in mind on the venues. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.